Hey everybody, thank you for having me. I'm Scott Thompson with Nordic Aquafarms. I'm the project manager engineer. I've been in that role for 4 years now, working on permitting of this project. But Nordic Aquafarms is a completely land-based finfish company. So that's all that we do is land-based finfish farming. We started with Atlantic salmon. Over the 4 years I've worked with them, they've flipped all of their farms over to a yellowtail kingfish. And that's the Samoa facility that we're working on permitting right now. I wanted to start kind of at a pretty high level, like why this project makes sense right now. So what you're looking at is global seafood consumption, basically. Down in the bottom is the capture fisheries. Up top is aquaculture. You'll notice kind of mid-90s, we maxed out how much fish we can take out of the ocean. Seafood demand, consumption keeps increasing. The only way to meet that demand is gonna be through aquaculture. So right now in the US, we import the majority of our seafood. This comes, the majority of it is foreign aquaculture. So it comes into the United States. Lots of times you don't get any information except for the species and the country it was grown in. You don't really know how it was grown, what type of systems it was grown in, not a lot of traceability. So another reason aquaculture makes a lot of sense is the feed conversion ratio. There's a lot of numbers up there, but I'll point you to the feed conversion ratio of fish. It's 1.1 on average for a farmed fish. When we were working with Atlantic salmon, we'd gotten that down to 1.05. And, it seems almost unbelievable, but for every 1.05 pounds of food you put in the tank, you'll end up with a pound of fish on the back end. So it's an incredibly efficient way to produce animal protein. When we flipped over to yellowtail kingfish, our food conversion ratio is slightly higher right now. It's at 1.25. And what that reflects is the length of time that Atlantic salmon have been farmed and the amount of research that has been done into their feed formulation. So that's, the work in front of us as Nordic right now, kind of on the front end of farming this fish to, work with educational institutions and do the research and try to bring that FCR down. Some of the other things we're working on doing with feed is looking at novel food ingredients like algae and different, compounds that come from seaweed and insects as well. But at the heart of us growing our fish is what's known as recirculating aquaculture systems. So we have a series of filters that are designed to keep the water quality at optimal conditions for the fish, and we reuse that water over and over again. So, the most basic example of this is just a fish tank. This isn't like a novel idea. It's something that's very well understood, but we're doing it at a much larger scale. So down at the bottom there, you can see, there's kind of two larger tanks and some equipment, and that's repeated over and over again. And those are our RAS loops. So the fish are in the larger tanks and all of the treatment systems are in the RAS system. And you can see what components are within those up on the cartoon form up above there. But every time we run an entire tank volume of water through our filter system, it's 99% of that water goes back to the tank, and then 1% leaves the RAS system with its solids and the uneaten food, and that goes to our main wastewater treatment plant. So on the front end and the back end of this facility, we have very robust water treatment systems. So a human hair is about 30 microns. All the water that comes onto the farm is filtered down to 0.04 microns. So that's small enough that it physically excludes all parasites, all bacteria, and most viruses. And then we hit it with a high UV dose. So everything coming on the farm is sterilized. We have the same water treatment on the back end. So everything leaving the farm is sterilized, all the solids are removed, and we capture and remove most all of the waste. So the talk earlier about coupling with seaweed farms, that was a flow-through system, which is very different than RAS. So that wastewater had very high nutrient loading, where our wastewater will have very low nutrient loading, but it still has synergies potentially with seaweed farming in that it has slightly more nutrients than the background, and it's sterile, so you don't have some of those human health concerns that you would have otherwise. But Nordic Aquafarms was really started to go against the status quo in the industry. Right now, that's for marine aquaculture, it's net pens. So it's a net out in the ocean. You feed the fish that you put in there, and you harvest them, but there's no control of what goes in or out of that farm, where this is a biosecure farm where we can keep our fish healthy. We've never had a major disease outbreak on our farms, but we reserve the right to use antibiotics if fish get sick, but we've never had to employ that. So, through our biosecurity measures, we're able to keep our fish healthy without having to use things like antibiotics. So I mentioned we're growing yellowtail kingfish. I have never met a fish that has more names. Also known as Hiramasa, Kampachi, Amberjack, but it seems like almost every region has their own name for this fish, but we call it a yellowtail kingfish. It's a Seriola lelandi. It's a great fish. That's one of our fish in the top picture there, but it's very versatile. I really enjoy it and can't wait till we're actually producing. So here's one of our facilities in Denmark. Right now we have 3 active farms as Nordic Aquafarms. One is just a broodstock and hatchery, and the other 2 are grow-out facilities. So this is what's in some of those buildings. The fish will come from our broodstock facility into these. They'll be in the juvenile unit, move to the grow-out unit, and then they're harvested and processed on site, and then they get shipped to the consumer on the same day. And again, there's a robust wastewater treatment system. And you can see we're a fan of renewable energy. We've committed to using 100% renewable energy for this project here in California. So here's what it looks like inside that juvenile building. Lots of happy fish in ideal conditions, trying to maximize their growth.
Speak up here.
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned, our project had evolved since we first proposed it. It was proposed as Atlantic salmon. We switched to yellowtail kingfish. So 15,000 metric tons is the maximum that this farm would ever produce, but phase 1, which is what we're working on right now, would be 3,000 metric tons. So we're redeveloping the old small pulp mill out there. You can see there's a lot of existing infrastructure there that we're going to have to demolish, clean up. It's a brownfield site. It operated until around 2008. And then in 2013, the EPA came in under the Superfund site cleanup program, and they removed most of the above ground waste, but they have not addressed asbestos, lead, or below ground contaminants. So that will be on Nordic once we start construction. But as you can see, there's a lot of cleanup there. Why would we choose this site when there's other vacant sites around? And it's because of the existing infrastructure that the pulp mill installed for their operations, but that we can reuse. And those are the outfall pipe and the seawater intakes that are on the bay side. So this outfall pipe doesn't really need a lot of upgrades. It's 1.5 miles long, thanks to the Surfrider Foundation. Has a great diffuser array. 1.5 miles offshore with a multi-port diffuser and 80 feet of water. The only active user of that right now is the Samoa wastewater treatment plant, but we would join them as a user of that. And then the seawater intakes are on the bay side, and those are going to need some modernization, and that includes installing 0.5 millimeter screens at the intake point, and that will help physically exclude, pretty much all life stages of fish. And we'll still have some impact on plankton, but we'll be mitigating for that through offsite wetland creation mitigation projects. So here's our phase 1 footprint. Again, all of our fish production will be in that big 188,000 square foot building up top. That includes broodstock, hatchery, juvenile, grow out, and harvest, all in that building. The smaller building is our wastewater treatment plant, and then there's some oxygen generation and storage areas also. So I mentioned I've been working on this for 4 years. I came on in early 2020, and that was just past due diligence. They hadn't really started on permitting. So I've been with this project for the last 4 years. We initially prepared an initial study, mitigated neg deck under Sequoia. The community said they would be much more comfortable if we did a full environmental impact report, even though there wasn't a trigger. So that took some time to prepare as well, but we're getting through it. Us as Nordic, we have the majority of our permits to operate the facility. We're still working with our partner, the Harbor District, to complete their permits related to the seawater intakes, which are outside of our lease area. But we're getting close, and it appears that we'll have all of our permits about mid-year of 2024, and that will allow us to start demolition, site remediation. We need to do ground improvement because of the geologic risks out there with seismic and tsunami, and then we'll be able to start construction. So it's a very long road, but I'm really excited to start transitioning out of permitting and into actual physical work.